luckily this next movie is not as disappointing.
Well, don't speak too soon.
Yeah, well, we will see what happens. Next up we have the 1980s and 1984, and I think it's fair to call this one sort of a classic, Children of the Corn, in which a young couple goes into a small town of Gatlin, Nebraska, and all the kids they have killed the adults, and it's sort of like a religious cult type thing, and they are pretty much going to go after this young couple and sacrifice them to their god, he who walks behind the roars. This is a adaptation of a Stephen King short story that was, I think, published in some magazine first, but then it was in his first collection of stories titled Night Shift in the late 70s. And it follows the basic plot of the short story decently well. It's the conclusion that's almost entirely different. But this is a movie I saw so many times when I was growing up. Like that opening scene with the children taking out the adults in the diner. I mean, when I was a kid watching that scene, I always thought that was like some classic cinema. And even seeing it now, I think it's a really good scene. And like that scene even in the garage, when they go after the mechanic guy. I think that's a really suspenseful scene. I think it's pretty solid. To be honest, this is a movie that I didn't expect to like as much as I have in the past, because it's been like maybe 3 or 4 years since I've seen it. But I actually think it's a pretty solid movie, only problem being some special effects issues toward the end, and a somewhat like overly 80s happy ending that may not necessarily be the same as what you might see in the short story.
Well, I guess funny story for me, not so much a ha-ha funny story, but when I first watched this probably almost 20 years ago. Yeah, I would have been in my teen years at that point. Even though I'd seen a whole lot of horror, certainly not as much as I've seen by now, 20 years later, but at that time, this was like the worst movie I'd ever seen. 20 years later, it's definitely nowhere near the worst movie I've ever seen, because now I've seen a whole lot of terrible shit. Especially during the 2000s, when anyone with a cheap camera could make a movie, put it out on DVD, and try to make money off of it, because there's a lot of terrible movies from the 2000s. So looking back at this movie now, it's certainly nowhere near as bad as I originally thought, but I still don't like it, for many different reasons. I thought the opening scene was fine. That was okay. That was, interesting and entertaining. And I mean, the plot of the movie, the plot's decent, and I guess, that's what you'd expect out of a Stephen King movie. At least the story should be okay. But I think scenes in the movie take too long. This is like a 90-minute movie, and I'm pretty sure they could have gotten through in less than an hour. They spend almost an hour just driving around and walking around looking for people. That takes up 2/3 of the movie right there.
Yeah, I suspect a lot of that might be because the original story was like only 20 pages at most, and trying to make that into an hour-and-a-half movie, maybe spread them a bit thin.
Yeah, so that's probably my biggest gripe with the movie, is just it just feels like if I was editing this thing, I would have cut down on a lot of scenes or filmed it in a different way to just, I don't know, speed it up a little bit. The acting in the movie's okay here and there, and there's some annoying kids, like, obviously the Isaac kid's a bit, he's a bit annoying.
He wasn't a kid.
Well, no, he's like 25 years old, or at least the actor is.
But I see where you're coming from.
Yeah. But in fact, the interesting thing is that he played as Chucky in a few small moments in the original Child's Play movie too, which is kind of weird. Just a weird trivia about that guy. But, there's also that gingerhead fuck.
Malachi, you don't like Malachi?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, there is something very... there's something about him that makes me want to slap him upside the head. Well, I mean, I want to slap all these kids upside the head because what they're doing is kind of stupid, but
I'm sorry, but you cannot mock the religious faith.
I am an outlander!
No, actually, to be honest, I always thought Malachi was a really cool character who was sort of like leading a resurgence against Isaac, and people were standing behind him. I just thought it was sort of like a little cool revolution aspect of him.
Yeah, he had some creepiness to him too when he's like stalking some of these people, but partly maybe because he's ginger as well. Man, if he was born like 15, 20 years later, he would have at school. I'd understand why he, turns insane and tries to kill people, but yeah, no, I mean, my biggest thing was just that the movie it just feels like it could have been cut down a lot. So while the movie's not bad, it's just, yeah, it just drags on too long throughout, and I can't see myself really wanting to watch it again just to get to some of the good scenes in the movie.
Well, luckily for you, the movie has like 7 sequels, so if you like the idea, but this movie didn't do it for you, maybe number 2 through 8 might.
Yeah, maybe there's a hidden gem in there. I must admit, I have seen one or two of the sequels, but probably like 15, 20 years ago. So
Yeah, as somebody who's actually sat through most of the sequels, I would recommend the 3rd movie and the 5th movie for different reasons. The 5th is probably the one that feels most like a slasher, and of course, being a fan of slashers, I think that one's pretty decent. And the 3rd movie has a really outlandish sort of plot going for it, where some kids from this city are taken to like a private Catholic school, and of course they don't really fit in with the Catholic kids. So it's so funny.
Mm.
And actually, that's one of the reasons I sort of like this. I guess like the idea of this series, the whole idea of these kids taking the Bible even more literally than the parents do. In the book it mentioned that I think they took out the entire New Testament and just following like an old style Baptist type religion, which I think is really interesting. That they see people once they reach the age of I think it was 18 or 19 as sinners, and they just kill them. And you know, I think it's a really interesting idea. Kids taking religion to an extreme and punishing their parents for their perceived sins. I know the movie didn't necessarily touch on that, but there were a few references to the main characters not liking the religious stuff going on that they were hearing on the radio and such. So I know it's a maybe a small aspect of this final production, but I think that's one of the reasons this movie sticks out with me more.
How about them effects at the end there when they're
Yeah,
like sacrificing and stuff?
it's somewhat unfortunate. I mean, I think there's a little charm to it, to be honest, but it definitely doesn't look amazing. And then the whole ending is, a bit much. They're trying to get the horse to walk on this monster come control them, and it didn't really blow me away, like it blew them away because it's wind. But and I guess the whole corny '80s ending, like, hey, let's take these kids and they can live with us, for a few weeks. I didn't care much for that. I mean, I actually think there's a remake to this movie from I think in 2009, and I actually think the remake has a better finale than this one does. But I mean, disregarding the special effects issues and some problems with the ending, I still think the movie's decent. I agree that maybe there's like a lot of walking and driving around that doesn't necessarily lead anywhere, but to me it sort of helps with the atmosphere of, hey, this town's really a dead town and like there's literally nobody here. So I don't know, I didn't have as big as an issue with it as you may have.
Now, speaking of the ending, I guess when the credits start showing up, or it just says the end, it just feels really abrupt, or out of place that it just starts to show at that moment.
Yeah, I actually forgot that until seeing it, just a few days ago, and it just seems awkward to me. I think this is a movie that, and a lot of this might just be nostalgic value because, like I said, I saw this so many times on AMC when I was a kid, and same thing with the second movie. And maybe it's that leads me to my, I guess, stronger faction of this. On IMDb, it has like a 5.7, which is it's not like terrible, but it's sort of a top it reaction. I think the movie's pretty decent. There's some issues with it, but overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I'll probably give it in. I'm thinking like an 8.5 and round it down to an 8 out of 10. Long live Malika. In before one.
I'm gonna give it a 5. Yeah, it just went on too long. I mean, it's got a few okay moments. Nothing that really is demanding a second viewing from me, or even to see just specific scenes in the movie. There's nothing in the movie that I think that was so good that I have to go back and watch that one scene. So even though it has its moments of a few decent moments, it's also just a very drawn out movie to me. So yeah, that's where I stand with that one.
Out of interest, do you think this or Stage Fright is a better movie?
If I had to pick between the two, I would rather watch this.
That's all that matters. This one wins.
Anyone listening to this like as a standalone video, just listening to Children of the Corn review, they're going to be like, what the fuck are you bringing up Stage Fright for?
I deeply apologize to any confusion.
And for anyone out there listening, he's talking about the 2014 musical, not the 80s movie.
I mean, the 80s movie, we should talk about that sometime, because that's a fantastic movie.
We'll see.